4 line by line explanation of page 60. I think you are very clear about today's session. We have to start with line by line explanation of page 60. The topic is then on the face of it, and we look at lesson number 6, and book is Vistas. Just look at. Before starting line by line explanation, just look at on the face of it. I think you are very clear. It means appearances. It's a phrase. If we look at the title of this particular chapter, it is a phrase. On the face of it means outer appearance. And if we quote the example, on the face of it, she seems very clever, but she is sincere. I think very clear so far as this particular title is concerned. This particular title, the title of this chapter is in the form of phrase. I think very clear. There is no doubt in that. You are very clear up to this particular. And if we look at the basic moral lesson of this chapter, to look at a very fine life skill here. That is significance of positive outlook or positive attitude. Importance of positive attitude even in negative circumstances. So I think you must have noted down this particular very important life skill in the dictionary of your brain. Now let us be in continuity. Now just start line by line explanation of page number 60. We have done up to this particular point. Now just look at Mr. Lamb in that way. No, you won't. If we look at this particular dialogue of Mr. Lamb, it is interconnected with the previous dialogue of Daddy or Daddy. And there is, I won't change, is purely connected with these three words. Wanted to highlight that particular point. Daddy here wanted to highlight that particular point that it could never ever be able to change. And moreover, he wanted to announce that particular point that he never believed in fairy tale story. Wanted to announce that particular point, he no more wanted any consolation from anybody. Very clear up to this particular point. Mr. Lamb was declaring that particular point that if he would think in a negative way, if Derek's attitude will be negative in that particular way, then no, could never ever be able to change. No. Just endorsing the point announced by Derek here. I won't change. And he was endorsing that point that if Derek's attitude would be negative, things would be same. No conversion will be there. And he would be lifelong suffering. I think very clear. Look at the next, Daddy. And no one will kiss me ever. Only my mother. And she kisses me on the other side of my face. And I don't like my mother to kiss me. She does it because she has to. Why should I like that? I don't care if nobody ever kisses me. Just look at the thinking level of this Derek. He had openly highlighted that particular point that nobody would ever kiss him. And if we explain this particular sentence, in other words, he wanted to announce that particular point that nobody would ever be able to love him. Very clear. And again, he was announcing that particular point that only his mother used to show affection because she was mother. Wanted to highlight that particular point that only his mother showed affection, motherly affection. Out of that motherly affection, she used to kiss him on the other side of his face. Now, seeing that particular point that his mother also used to kiss him on the other part or other side of his face, which is quite normal, which is not damaged. And I don't like my mother to kiss me. Announce that particular point that he could never ever like that particular emotion of his mother. He never wanted that his mother would kiss him, because indirectly she was showing hatred. What kind of hatred? You have to look at the things. Never ever be able to, she could never ever be able to kiss a damaged cheek of that guy. She does it because she has to. Oh, just look at these words. Look at the negative attitude of this guy, Derek. Wanted to highlight that particular point that his mother used to kiss him because she was a mother. And that was her moral responsibility. Showing affection for her child was her moral responsibility. So that is why she was just doing that drama. I think very clear. It was not genuine in approach, because she used to kiss on the normal side of that side of his face. She had never kissed him on the damaged cheek of that guy. Why should I like that? Now just look at negative query of that guy. He wanted to hide that particular point that why he should like that. I don't care if nobody ever kisses me. Using very poisonous words, irritable words due to his negative thinking. Highlighting that particular point that he didn't care if nobody ever used to kiss him. He wanted to highlight that particular point that would be least bothered if nobody would be able to show any affection for him. Very clear up to this particular point here. You have to note down different points, and we are able to observe poisonous words and negative attitude in each and every sentence. Very clear. Because he was never ever be able to recognize that particular fact, that is epistemology of laws. Nobody had taught that particular term to that guy. So that is why he was extremely upset. That is why he had become pessimistic. Mr. Lamb, but do you care if you never kiss them? Just look at the query of Mr. Lamb. And from this particular query, we are able to observe the attitude of this personality, that is Mr. Lamb. No doubt he was handicapped, but he was very positive, very optimistic. So that is why he was using these words. He was saying, but if very careful to look at that particular here, Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight the positive point. The positive point is he wanted to highlight that particular point. If people would be ready to show affection or love for him, would he be able to accept that? Then what? Oh, just look at the query, negative query. What? Girls, pretty girls, long hair and large eyes. People you love. Wanted to elaborate the same point started in previous dialogue. Ah, but do you care if you never kiss them? Oh, he wanted to elaborate that particular point in fantastic ways. Wanted to highlight that girls, pretty girls. I think you are very clear about this word pretty. If we interpret this word, is used for extremely beautiful things or girls. Very clear. And if we look at the word handsome, handsome is used to highlight the positive physical outlook of male members. And if we look at the next word, beautiful. Beautiful word is used to highlight the fine physical outlook of female members. But if we look at this pretty words, it will highlight, it is used to highlight wonderfully beautiful, extremely beautiful, can be used for natural things, man-made things, and even female members of society. Very clear. Your points are very clear about the topic. So you will never ever be able to get confusion in while using the word handsome, beautiful, pretty. I think very clear. Oh, Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight that particular point, long hair and large eyes. Wanted to elaborate that particular point, that if pretty girls wanted to highlight their affectionate feeling for him, people you love. Again, he was just elaborating the same point. People, direct love. Very clear, there is no doubt in that. Now, again, negative attitude of Derry. Who would let me? Not one. Look at the poisonous, negative one. He wanted to make a query. Who would let me? In other words, Derry wanted to highlight that particular point, that nobody would ever be able to feel attracted towards him. Not one. He wanted to elaborate that particular point by highlighting that not even a single one. Here he was just cutting the point of Mr. Lamb. I think very clear. Due to his negativity. Mr. Lamb. Who can tell? Again, just look at these three words, positive words of Mr. Lamb. Wanted to highlight that nobody can predict about the future. Future is always unpredictable. So that is why he was using these three words, just making a query in a very different way. Who can tell? He wanted to highlight that particular point, that nobody was just right to announce negativity beforehand. Very clear up to this particular point here. He wanted to highlight that particular point, that future is always unpredictable. If negativity is there, sometimes conversion of positivity can also be there. Blessings of Almighty. Wanted to highlight. I won't ever look different. Again, he was using very negative words. Terry was using very negative words. I won't ever look different. He wanted to highlight that particular point, that his physical outlook could never be positive. His face would ever be damaged. He could never ever be able to show his face to anybody throughout his life. When I am as old as you, I look the same. And he wanted to highlight that particular point, then while he would become old, his outlook would be same. There will not be any conversion, that is positive conversion in physical outlook of that fellow. I will still only have half a face. He wanted to highlight that particular point, that while he would be old, he would still be with a half face, because half of his face was already damaged. I think very clear. Now just look at the next, Mr. Lamb. So you will, but the words won't. The words got a whole face, and the words there to be looked at. Oh, just look at very positive words of Mr. Lamb. Wanted to highlight that particular point. He was just endorsing that particular point of Derek. While he was highlighting this point, I will still only have a half face. Well, Mr. Lamb was endorsing that particular point by highlighting that particular point, no doubt. His physical outlook would be same forever, throughout his life. And here he wanted to highlight very important point, but the word would be with complete face. The people on this globe would never ever be having half a face. The words got a whole face, and the words there to look at. Wanted to give great lesson to this guy. That wonderful word is there. At least he could be able to observe wonderful word. Amazing word. Here, he wanted to give very fine life skill to Derek, and he must be positive. Significance of positive attitude is highlighted through these words of Mr. Lamb. Wanted to highlight that particular point, he could ever be able to enjoy wonderful, amazing word. Then, do you think this is a word? This word garden. Now, just again, he was thinking negatively. He was highlighting that particular point in a very different order. He was thinking, if he thought that was the word, that was that old garden. He wanted to use very negative type words for Mr. Lamb. Here was using very negative words. He wanted to highlight that particular point, this old garden. That was the entire word, entire globe. Again negative, again negative. Mr. Lamb. When I'm here, not the only one, but the word. As much as anywhere. Just look at the beauty of these words of Mr. Lamb. Mr. Lamb was just highlighting that particular point, that when he used to be in the garden, he always considered that particular point, that entire word is there. Because he was very positive and he used to consider himself the entire word. But the word as much as anywhere. Beautiful words, beautiful. We're able to learn very fine life skill, that we must be positive even in our critical circumstances. This was a very fine life skill. But Derek was not able to recognize the words of Mr. Derek. Does your leg hurt you? He was making very different kind of question. Just inquiring from Mr. Lamb if his leg hurts him. Very clear up to this particular point. He wanted to make a query that if his fictitious leg irritates him. It is very clear. Mr. Lamb. Tin doesn't hurt boy. Just look at the positive reply of Mr. Lamb. He wanted to highlight that particular point that tin, the strongest metal, never hurts anybody, never hurts anybody, guy. Just look at the wonderful. Recognize attitude of Lamb here. Then it came off, did it? Now just wanted to highlight very negative point again. There he was asking very negative points. When it came off, he wanted to highlight that particular point when he had got that particular injury and he was able to get instruction of doctors for fictitious leg. Was he used to feel irritated at that particular moment? His students, time is aggressive and sufferer of that particular negativity, used to feel negative. The early stage of that particular trauma. It's quite natural. Now just look at the next. And now, I mean, where the tin stops at the top, interrogation. Then he was asking irrelevant question again. And now, he wanted to highlight that particular point. He wanted to repeat that particular point that now how he used to feel to look at his fictitious leg. How he used to feel to look at his physical handicap. I mean, where the tin stops at the top. Because already Mr. Lamb had given the answer to that particular query. In the early dialogues, I think you must be able to look at this dialogue. While he had announced that tin never hurts, he wanted to repeat the same. He wanted to highlight that he meant where the tin stops at the top. He wanted to repeat the same point that if we look at metal tin, the strongest metal is the basic metal. He wanted to highlight that particular point. Next step is Mr. Lamb. Now and then, in wet weather, it doesn't signify. Now he wanted to highlight the genuine point. Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight the genuine point. Sometimes he used to feel little bit abnormal due to his fictitious leg. Now and then, the phrase, it means occasional. Very clear. And again, he was highlighting that particular point in wet weather. Wanted to highlight that while rainy season or I think wet weather used to be there, he used to feel irritated to look at that due to the trouble caused by fictitious lamp. Very clear? It doesn't seem. Wanted to highlight that particular point that he could never give the importance of that trouble. Now and then in wet weather, just look at the meaning of that. He wanted to highlight that particular point while rainy season used to be there, he could never ever be able to walk properly due to, I think if we look at swampy land or due to wet land, he wanted to highlight. It becomes very difficult for him to walk while wet weather is there. Wet weather means rainy season, rainfall. I think very clear. Then, oh, that's something else they all say. Look at all those people who are in pain and brave and never cry and never complain and don't feel sorry for themselves. Now he was just converting the point. Just look at the next point of day. Be ready to Understand the next point, next dialogue of very dear students. To highlight, oh, that's something else. They also wanted to highlight that particular point that people highlight a few points in a very different. What do the people highlight? Just look at the points highlighted by people he wanted to announce here. Look at all those people. He wanted to highlight that particular point that people just give him guidelines by highlighting such type of words. Look at all those people who are in pain and brave and never cry and never complain and don't feel sorry for themselves. He wanted to highlight that particular point that sometimes people want to give him a great lesson by using these words. Look at all those people who are in critical state. The people whose condition is worst, the people who are not able to look at the things. Here, they wanted to highlight that particular point that people want to console it by using psychiatrists. Very clear. I haven't said it. And Mr. Lamb was announcing that particular point that he had not used these words. Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight that particular point that he had not used these words that look, people who are in pain and brave and never cry and never complain and don't feel sorry for themselves. I think very clear up to this particular. Mr. Lamb. I haven't said it. Mr. Lamb was highlighting that particular point that he had not announced or declared these words. And think of all those people worse off than you. He was again elaborating the words of common public. The words used by common public to console that guy, he wanted to elaborate the words. I wanted to highlight that people also say that particular point, think of all those people worse off than you. It's highlight that particular point that he must be able to think about those people who are in worst condition, who are worse off than him, whose condition is more critical than his condition. Think again, they elaborate the word public or people knows the words to console that guy. I think you might have been blinded or born deaf or have to live in a wheelchair or be damned in your head and dribble. Wanted to elaborate the words of public again. The people use different words to console him, to motivate him, to inspire him. He wanted to highlight that particular point. That people highlight these words that he must be able to think about those people who were more critical than him. And again, they used to elaborate the same point. He must be able to think on that particular line that if he had been blinded, if he had been blinded, or if he had been born deaf, if not able to move, he would have to use wheelchair. If he would never be able to walk properly, or if he would be mentally poor. That means stupid, mentally poor in your head. So to highlight that particular point, that public or people use different words to console him. So just say that if he, what would be his condition if he was able to look at the more critical state like blindness, deafness, or I think if we look at the things physically handicapped, unable to walk properly, or mentally poor. Daft in head, your head means mentally poor and dribble. And dribbling, if we look at the word, it means while drops of saliva come out of the mouth of mentally poor people. Very clear. Again, note it down. Drops of saliva come out of the mouth of mad persons. That is dribbling. Here he wanted to highlight that particular point that people just try their best to inspire him by using different words. And on the contrary, he wanted to highlight that particular point that these words never inspire him. These words always used to irritate him because he had become extremely negative. Very clear. Now just look at the next page. Mr. Lamb. And that's all true, and you know it. Now, Mr. Lamb was endorsing the previous point of Danny. The consolation of people to upgrade his attitude. Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight that particular point that what people speak or inspire 100% true. And he wanted to again add to his words that he must be able to get knowledge about it. That if common people or the people who are very near to him wanted to console him or wanted to inspire him, wanted to just motivate him by highlighting the example of the people who were in more critical state than him, they were 100% right. And he must be able to recognize the value of God. Yeah. It won't make my face change. I wanted to highlight the negative point again that it would not change his physical outlook. Do you know? One day a woman went by me in the street. I was at a bus stop. Yes. And she was with another woman. And she looked at me and said, dash, 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 whisper, dash, dash, dash. Only I heard her. Dash, 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 dash. She said, look at that. That's a terrible thing. That's a face only a mother could love. Now just look at the words of Delhi. Here, highlighting the fact. Just try to understand what he wanted to convey. Do you know? He wanted to just add a question tag for the land. He was in the knowledge of that particular point that one day a lady, a woman, had gone by me in the street. There in the street, and Derek was also moving out of that particular street. He was also in the same street. I was at a bus stop. I wanted to highlight that particular point. In that particular state, there was bus stop, and he was at the bus stop at that particular moment. And she was with another woman. I wanted to highlight that particular point that that woman was with one more woman. She looked at me and she said, whispered, only I heard. Only I heard. To highlight that particular point that that woman was criticizing me and he was able to hear the words. She said, just look at the words of that woman. There he wanted to announce that he had heard. Look at that. Wanted to highlight that particular point that one woman was just using such type of words and he was telling these words to another woman who was with her at that moment. Look at that. Just look at that. That guy. That is a terrible thing. She was using very negative words. She was highlighting that was very negative. Terrible means extremely negative. That is a face only a mother could love. She was announcing that particular point, that particular worst kind of face was to be loved by mother only. Otherwise, nobody on this earth would ever love that particular face. She wanted to highlight that particular point that two women were there. One was whispering and was just, she was using very negative words for Daddy. Just talking the other woman who was with her. The critical thing, nobody would ever be able to love that particular guy with the exception of his mother. Not just very clear. Wanted to highlight the particular point that women was criticizing him and he was feeling very negative at that particular moment because he was able to listen the words of that woman while she was talking to another woman in a low tone. Whisper. You are able to look at the thing, to talk in a low tone, low volume. Mr. Lamb, so you believe everything you hear that. Just look. Wonderful words of Mr. Lamb. Mr. Lamb highlighting that particular negative words of Daddy in a very different way. So just inquiring from Daddy. So you believe everything you hear that. He would ever be able to believe everything he used to hear. Yeah, Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight that particular point that he was foolish enough to accept or just believe everything he used to hear. Daddy, it was cruel. Daddy was elaborating the same words due to his negative attitude. So he was very negative, very cruel. We are very familiar with this word cruel. And maybe not meant as such, just something said between them. Let's look at the wonderful words of Mr. Lamb here. Mr. Lamb wanted to highlight that particular point might be two women talking some other different topic. Here he wanted to make that guy positive. He wanted to give him a great lesson that he could never ever believe on hearsay. Your students, you must note down very fine life skill here. Listen to everybody. But filter on the screen of truth whether the things are right or wrong. So with this, time says that we must close our lecture. Thank you.